Hey everyone! Welcome to my channel, Nancy's Tales, your one-stop shop for wild stories with a twist. I'm all about digging into old-school folklore, unsolved mysteries, and a ton of other crazy topics. So, kick back and join me for today's tale. It's a doozy. Way back in the spring and autumn era, think pioneer days with a twist, there was this little spot called Chen County. In Chen County, you had three docs who were thick as thieves: Jim Harper, Connor Neal, and a guy everyone just called Pops. Things took a turn when Jim Harper bit the dust way too soon. Left behind were his widow and a handful of kids, all on their own, leaning hard on Connor and Pops to keep things together. Jim Harper's wife Jessica, Jess to most folks, came from the Morgan Woodworks clan, a family with some clout around those parts. When Jim passed, Jess was barely pushing 25, stuck raising their boy, Jake Morgan, solo. With Connor Neal and Pops pitching in, Jake grew up fast. Now he's a young man ready to carve his own path. Running Chen County was Sheriff Chuck Lennon, a doc by trade but a grade A dirtbag by choice. When he wasn't wearing his badge, he was tossing out crude one-liners and spinning filthy yarns to anyone who'd listen. For Chuck, Connor, and Pops, women were fair game. Didn't matter who was boss or lackey, they were all chasing the same thrill. Segment 5. The Terrible Trio. Sheriff Chuck and his two wingmen were cut from the same cloth. Same vibe, same dirty playbook. They'd huddle up, swapping stories with way too much detail, no shame in sight. One afternoon, Connor Neal grabbed his rifle and pitched a hunting trip beyond the county line. "Let's bag some bigger game," he said, dragging the crew out farther than usual. By the time they checked the sky, it was getting dark, too late to call it a day. Out in the sticks, Connor glanced at Jake Morgan, Jim's kid, who tagged along at just 16. "Doc Connor," Jake piped up, "it's pitch black out here. No way we're making it back to town tonight." Connor sized up the kid, smirking. "What's the plan then, Jake? Crash out hier in the Wild? You scared?" Jake shrugged, playing tough. "Yeah, I'm freaked out by the dark, okay? What do we do?" Connor chuckled. "Stick with kid. Nothing to worry about with your Uncle Connor around." "Hey, gotcha, Doc," Jake grinned, fessing up. "I was messing with you." Jake's grin turned sly. "You know, Doc, this bamboo patch we're in? It's home turf." Connor blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, what? How's that work?" "Mom and I moved out here after Dad died," Jake explained. "This hunting trip? I steered us this way on purpose. Been years since I've seen her, and I figured you'd want to catch up too." Connor's jaw dropped. Back when Jim was alive, he'd had a soft spot for Jess, her sharp eyes, rosy cheeks, that knockout vibe. Now, after all these years, the thought of seeing her again lit a fire under him. "Lead the way, kid," he said, eager as hell. They hoofed it half a mile through the woods until a homestead popped into view, surrounded by peach trees in full bloom. Even in the fading light, those red blossoms were a sight, pure calm washing over them. Jake hopped off his horse and pointed to the big front door. "Doc Connor, Mom's waiting inside." She knew we were coming, set this whole trip up herself. "She's always talking about how you and Pops looked out for us after Dad passed," Jake added. "Wanted to grow up fast and repese vor." "Don't talk like that, kid," Connor cut in, shaking his head. "Your dad was family to us, Pops and me. Helping you out wasn't a favor, it was just what we did." He was a short guy, Connor, but he had a big presence, waving off the gratitude like it was nothing. "How's your mom holding up these days?" "See for yourself," Jake said as they strolled up to the front porch. There was Jess, standing by the steps, ready to greet them like old times. "I've reworked these parts with a gritty small-town American vibe. Think dusty trails and rough-around-the-edges characters. Names like Ha Knock Thursday become Jim Harper, and Tran Quoc shifts to Chen County for that frontier feel. The dialogue's punchy and natural, keeping the story's spirit alive. Let me know if this hits the mark, and I'll keep churning through the next chunks." Jess gave Connor a quick nod, all business but warm, like she'd been expecting him for ages. She'd set up a spread inside, nothing fancy, just a sturdy table with a bottle of whiskey and some glasses. Over dinner, Jess worked the room like a pro. She got Jake, her boy, liquored up fast. Kid couldn't hold it and stumbled off to crash in the back. Then she turned to Connor, pouring him another round, chatting about the old days, 10+ years since they'd last sat like this. The two of them locked eyes, and you could feel the air shift, something unspoken but loud as hell. Connor, half in the bag, slammed his glass down, shattering it on the hardwood floor. He bent to scoop up the mess, and Jess crouched too, close enough that their shoulders brushed. When Connor looked up, her hand, smooth as silk, reached for the same shard. His eyes flicked higher, catching her blouse hanging open, showing more than she probably meant to. Heart pounding, he grabbed her wrist instead of the glass, letting it roll off to the side. Jess didn't pull back, just raised an eyebrow, like she dared him to make the next move.
The tension snapped like a twig.
Connor, buzzing from the whiskey, lurched to his feet. A gaggle of housemaids, 10 of them, swarmed in to steady him, but he shrugged them off like flies. Jess waved them away too, all but one, Spring May, her right-hand gal. Together, they hauled Connor toward the bedroom, his boots scuffing the floor.
Spring May slipped out quick, leaving Jess and Connor alone. Door shoot, world gone kviet.
It had been over a decade since Jim died, and Jess hadn't exactly been a nun. Folks whispered she'd tangled with some wild stuff, dreams of a mystery man at 15, some celestial cowboy who'd swept her off her feet in her sleep. She'd learned tricks from those nights, moves that'd make a preacher blush, and she wasn't shy about using them. That night with Connor? They went at it till dawn, raw reckless, like they were making up for lost time.
Kam Sonnenriese. Connor leaned in close, voice low in Jess' ear. Hey, darling. Inita favor. You game. Jess, still tangled in the shades, gave a lazy smile.
After all you and Pops did for me and Jake? Name it, hon. Perfect, Connor grinned. I don't want much, just that red bandana you've got on. Without a second thought, Jess grabbed it off the nightstand, soft, worn, still warm from her. She folded it neat and handed it over.
Take it, Doc.
See this, it's like seeing me. Touch it, it's like touching me. Connor stuffed it in his shirt, right over his heart, already half-dressed and plotting his next move.
Jess sat up, pulling the blanket tight. Hey, Connor, last night? Don't breate a word to Jake.
He's still a kid in some ways. Got it, Connor nodded, tugging his boots on. Can I swing by again, though? Long as the kid doesn't know. Any time, Doc, Jess said, her voice smooth as whiskey.
Door's open for you. Just keep it quiet.
A few days later, Connor pitched another hunting trip, this time roping in Pops, tall, wiry, and always up for trouble. They rode out to the bamboo patch, but the sky cracked open, big rain, thunder rattling the trees. Pops squinted at Jake.
Hell of a storm, Keith. Novere tu duxes mess, wat se play. Jake smirked, pretending to mull it over.
I know a spot nearby. You cool with that, Uncle Pops? Lead on, Pops said, wiping rain from his hat.
Ein Fahr right.
Nope, Jake replied. Just over there, Mom's new place in the bamboo grove. Jess is out here? Pops asked, surprised. Yeah, Jake said, nudging his horse forward. She's been holed up nearby since Dad died. Me, you, and Connor kept her afloat all these years. Food, cash, whatever we could scrape together.
Pops sighed, long and heavy. Man, time flees.
How's she doing now? She never forgets you and Connor, Jake said. Sheriff Chuck even hooked me up with a deputy gig and gave her this land as a thank you for raising me right.
She's grateful as hell. Wanted me to bring you out here.
This chunk picks up the pace, diving into the messy drama between Connor and Jess, then setting up Pops for his own run-in. I've kept the small-town grit, whiskey instead of wine, bandanas over silk pouches, and a vibe that's more frontier fling than royal affair. Names like Swan might turn into Spring May for that earthy American touch. Let me know if this tracks with what you're picturing, and I'll crank out the next batch. Rain hammering down, Pops and Jake bolted through the bamboo grove, soaked to the bone. They hit Jess's little homestead, and she was ready, hot coffee brewing, towels stacked by the door. Get in here and dry off, she called, tossing them each a rag. Jake and Pops cleaned up, swapped their drenched gear for something dry, and settled in. Dinner was on the table quick, simple, hearty stuff, and Jess made sure Jake got a few extra shots of that coffee, spiked of course. Kid was out like a light soon enough, snoring in the back room. With Jake down for the count, Spring May and Jess teamed up to steer Pops toward the bedroom. Spring May bailed fast, leaving just Jess and Pops in the dim light, rain still pounding outside. No hesitation this time. They crashed into each other, all heat and hunger, tearing through the night like a bar fight with better stakes. Jess brought her A-game, those wild tricks she'd picked up over the years. And Pops? He matched her move for move, fueled by some old-school stamina and maybe a little something extra he'd stashed in his kit. They went at it hard, 3 rounds straight, no slowing down. Jess was grinning ear to ear, loving every second, while Pops kept swinging like a champ. By the 4th round, she had to call in Spring May and the housemaids to tag-team the chaos. Pops was a damn force of nature. Even Spring May, green as she was, jumped in, wide-eyed but game. Come dawn, they'd clocked 5 rounds total, Pops still standing tall, grinning like he'd won the county fair. Morning light crept in, and Pops stretched, pulling on his shirt. Jess, darlin', I need something to remember this by. You in? Anything for you, hon, she said, tossing him a sly wink. She rummaged around and handed over a pair of silk drawers, high-end stretchy, the kind you'd never guess under her usual getup. Wear these or just keep 'em close, she teased. They're me in your pocket. Pops tucked them into his coat, already itching to brag about it later. Thing is, Connor and Pops weren't exactly subtle. Word spread fast in Chen County, 2 buddies sneaking off to Jess's place, trading trophies like kids with baseball cards. It didn't take long for the gossip to turn sour. Jake, Jess's boy, caught wind of it eventually, pieced it together and flipped out. In a rage, he rounded up some muscle, stormed the homestead, and took out Sheriff Chuck, along with Connor and Pops for good measure. So how'd Chuck get roped into this mess? Rewind a bit. Connor was pissed. Pops had scored those fancy drawers, a step up from his bandana, and it gnawed at him. Chuck, the sheriff, had always been a lek, drooling over Jess from afar but never making a move. Connor saw an opening. Why not sick Chuck on her, he figured. Sheriff owes me one, and it'll even the score with Pops. Next day, Chuck sniffing around, asking Connor about fresh game outside town, code for something tastier than deer. Game's slim pickings around here, Chuck griped, leaning on his desk. I've hunted everything worth chasing. Connor smirked. Nah, Sheriff, you're thinking too small. Widows, man, they've got flavor you can't find in the young bucks. Chuck's eyes lit up. You serious? Who are we talking about? Jess Harper, Connor said, low and slow. Jim's widow. Pushing 40 now, but she's still a knockout, looks half her age. Chuck licked his lips. Heard she was a stunner back in the day. Still got it, huh? Damn right, Connor nodded. She's got moves too, stuff that'll fry your brain. You want in, Sheriff? Chuck hesitated, scratching his chin. Want? Hell yes. But Jim was your pal, ain't that crossing a line? Lines are for suckers, Connor shot back. You don't taste her, you're missing out on the best damn dish in Chin County. I ain't tried her yet, saving her for you, boss. Chuck bought it hook, line, and sinker. All right, set it up. I'm game. Connor played it smart, figuring Chuck wouldn't suspect he'd already had a go at Jess. So when the sheriff rolled up to her place, he was all nerves, didn't want to overstep and look like a fool. Jess didn't clock Chuck's sleazy side either. She treated it like a formal visit, all polite and proper. Dinner was laid out, nothing too heavy, some spicy chili, scrambled eggs, fresh greens, and a slab of tofu, all plated nice. Chuck raised a glass, downing 3 shots of whiskey with Jess, but that was it, no one pushed for more. Chuck sulked after the meal, nursing another drink alone. He'd expected fireworks, not this stiff howdy neighbor routine, felt like a king snubbed by a barmaid. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a girl by the door, Spring May, Jess's go-to-helper, holding a tray with a tall bottle of plum liquor. She was young, fresh-faced, and cute as hell. Chuck waved her over, grinning like a fox in a henhouse. What's your name, sweetheart? He asked, voice dripping with charm. Spring May, she said, dipping her head a little. This here's plum liquor, Mama Jess brewed it special for you, Sheriff. Chuck's eyes flicked from the bottle to her chest, lingering way too long. Plum liquor, huh? You're holding the good stuff. How about playing matchmaker for me and your boss lady? Spring May didn't flinch. Drink up, Sheriff, and I'll take you straight to her room. Chuck didn't bother with a glass, chugged it right from the bottle, wiped his mouth, and followed her like a dog on a leash. Spring May led him to a back room, Jess's summer hideout, decked out in red, curtains, walls, the works. Jess had ditched the prim getup for a sheer red dress, hugging every curve, leaving little to the imagination. Maybe it was the plum liquor kicking in, but Chuck lost it, lunged at her, wrapping her up tight. "You shouldn't tease me like this," he growled, then went to town, slobbering over her like a drunk at last call. Jess faked a smile, playing along, couldn't exactly tell the sheriff to get lost. Chuck wasn't smooth like Connor or relentless like Pops. His game was sloppy, all huff and puff. Still, Jess put on a hell of a performance, moaning and grinning like he was some kind of stud. Chuck bought it, thinking his old dog tricks had her hooked, strutting like he'd just tamed the wildest filly in Chin County. He tried hard, pushing past his limits, and Jess kept egging him on, making him feel like a champ. Next morning, Chuck peeled himself out of bed, smug as hell. He yanked a gold hairpin from Jess's stash, her everyday piece, and pocketed it like a trophy. "Caught me a good one," he muttered, strolling out with a swagger, already planning to rub it in Connor and Pop's faces. Back in town, he called them over, spilling every detail, how he'd still got it at his age, laying it on thick. Chuck wasn't playing sheriff that day. He plopped down on the jailhouse steps, yapping like one of the boys. "Jess was a dream," he bragged. "You fellas feel that heat too, right?" Connor, forgetting Chuck was the boss, smirked. "Yeah, Sheriff, she's something else. Know it firsthand." Chuck's eyes narrowed. "Wait a damn minute, you've been there already? Spill it." Pops jumped in, laughing. "Hell, I've had my turn too. She's a firecracker, couldn't resist." Chuck leaned forward, suspicious. "How often you sneaking out there, Connor?" "Just once," Connor lied, then caved under the glare. "All right, fine, more than that." Pops roared, slapping his knee. "Should have jumped her sooner, Sheriff. Too late now." Chuck grinned, brushing it off. "No hard feelings, boys. I'm the king here. If I taste her first or last, don't matter. She's worth it." Then he pulled out the hairpin. "Check this, proof I'm top dog." Connor wasn't about to let Chuck steal the spotlight. He stood up, peeling off his jacket to flash that red bandana tucked against his chest. "Top dog, huh? Feast your eyes on this, Sheriff," he crowed. "Jess handed me this straight off her neck, ain't no picking that up off the ground." Pops, not one to sit quiet, jumped in, unbuttoning his shirt and yanking down his trousers just enough. "Check these bad boys," he grinned, showing off those silk drawers. "She gave me the real deal, closest thing to her skin. Your hairpin's cute, Chuck, but this? This is number one." The three of them stood there, cackling like fools, flashing their trophies with zero shame, like nobody else in Chin County mattered. They swapped jabs and dirty laughs, barely breathing between the boasts, acting like they'd conquered the world. But that racket? It pissed off the wrong guy, Tom Shear, a straight-laced deputy who'd had enough of their crap. While Chuck, Connor, and Pops yucked it up on the jailhouse steps, Tom stormed in, red-faced and ready to blow. Tom didn't mince words. "Sheriff, you and your clowns need to cut this nonsense," he barked. "Men and women got rules. Decency, you ever hear of it? You're strutting around, bragging about this filth in public. Where's your damn dignity?" He glared at them. "Keep this up, and Chin County's done for. Can't run a town on whiskey and skirts. Shape up, Chuck, or we're all screwed." Chuck smirked, brushing it off. "All right, Tom, simmer down. I'll clean up my act, happy now." Tom stomped off, and Connor and Pops slunk back later, leaning in close to Chuck. "Look, Sheriff, maybe cool it with Jess's place for a bit," Connor muttered. "Yeah," Pops chimed in, "Tom's gotta stick up his ass, let's lay low." Chuck scowled. "Screw that. I'd rather ditch the badge than miss out on that action. You boys can sit it out, but I'm going back, you hear me?" Connor shrugged. "Fine, but Tom's a nag. How you gonna dodge him?" Chuck's eyes glinted. "Easy. He's the problem, right? No Tom, no trouble." Pops nodded slow. "Yeah, if he's gone, we're clear to ride out to Jess's whenever." "Exactly," Chuck said, cracking his knuckles. "You two handle it. Make it quiet." Connor and Pops swapped a look, then nodded. With the sheriff's blessing, they slipped off and took care of Tom, quick, clean, and under the radar. No more nagging deputy, no more roadblocks. The trio was free to hit Jess's bamboo hideout whenever they damn well pleased. Trouble was, their little spree didn't sit right with everyone. Jake Morgan, Jess's kid, now 18 and built like a brick wall, started piecing it together. Last year, at 16, he dragged Connor and Pops out to see his mom, thinking it was all gratitude for their help after Jim died. But now? He caught the whispers, his uncles and the sheriff treating Jess like a prize to pass around. It burned him up, turning respect into rage. Every time those three rolled up to the homestead, Jake ducked out, couldn't stand the sight of him. 2 years on, Jake wasn't a kid anymore, trained up, handy with a gun, and deputized by Chuck to keep him sweet. One night, the trio swaggered in again, setting up a booze-soaked bash at Jess's. They were loud, slurring filthy stories right in front of Jake, no filter, no care. Jake listened, fists clenched, until he couldn't take it. He stormed off, locked Jess in her room, then rallied the hired hands. "Round up the house, nobody leaves," he growled, grabbing his rifle. Chuck was mid-rant, glass in hand, when Jake kicked things off. Connor caught the vibe first. "Shit, Jake's coming in hot." Pops bolted for the back door. "Front's blocked, move." The three scrambled, Chuck yelling for Jess to bail him out, but the back was bolted tight. Jake charged in, eyes locked on Chuck. "You bastard," he roared, letting an arrow fly, straight through the sheriff's chest. Connor and Pops dove through a busted window, scrambling like rats, knowing they'd screwed up big. Chuck slumped dead in the dirt, arrow sticking out of him like a flagpole. Connor and Pops hightailed it through the bamboo, not stopping till they crossed the county line into Shaw territory, a neighboring stretch run by tougher folks. Jake, chest heaving, didn't waste time. He rallied his crew, stormed back to Chin County's main drag, and took charge. Following old frontier rules, he spun a yarn about Chuck croaking from a bad batch of hooch, kept the arrow part quiet. Next day, he and the locals propped up Chuck's nephew Wally as the new sheriff, kept it all in the family, nice and tidy. Word of Chuck's death hit Shaw territory fast, but the details were fuzzy, nobody knew the full scoop. Then Connor and Pops rolled in, looking like drowned rats, begging for a lifeline. They got an audience with Shaw's big boss, Vince Shaw, one of the last hard-ass warlords from the old days, a real player in these parts. "Jake Morgan's gone rogue," Connor panted. "Killed Chuck cold. You gotta step in, Vince, make it right." Vince leaned back, chewing it over, his crew buzzing around him like flies on a carcass. Vince called his boys to the table, top dogs in Shaw territory, including a slick operator named Ray Vance. Ray wasn't just brains and brawn, he had a knack for staying sharp, even as the years piled on. He'd crossed paths with Jess back in Chen County once, couldn't shake her from his head since. Now, hearing about the mess over there, Ray saw a chance to stir the pot and snag something sweet. "Vince," he said, cool as ice, "we march on Chun, clean up their mess. It's what a big shot like you does, keeps the neighbors in line." Vince didn't need much convincing. Ray and the crew egged him on, and soon he had a posse saddled up, riding hard for Chin County. Wally, the new sheriff, was off visiting kin up north, leaving the town wide open. Chen's locals weren't about to tangle with Vince's outfit. They'd heard the stories and folded fast. Every bit of blame got dumped on Jake. "He's the troublemaker," they said, throwing him under the wagon to save their own hides. Vince's boys marched right in, no shots fired, claiming the place like it was a Sunday picnic. Jake caught wind of Shaw's crew too late, tried to muster a fight, but the town had already rolled over. He grabbed Jess, aiming to bolt with her, but his own men turned tail, pinning him down. Outnumbered and outgunned, Jake didn't stand a chance. Vince's crew hauled him in, and after a quick ugly scrap, they put him down hard, left him bleeding out in the street. Jess got dragged off too, hauled up to Vince like a prize catch, her fate hanging on his next move. Jess dropped to her knees in front of Vince, head bowed, voice steady despite the mess. "We're a busted town now," she said. "My life's in your hands, big man. Kill me, it's like squashing a bug. Spare me, and I'll do whatever, serve you anything. Just take pity on a gal who's got nothing left." Vince squinted down at her, taking in the curls, the tear-streaked face, damn near felt sorry for her. "Boys," he rumbled to his crew, "I'm thinking I'll take her back to Shaw. What's the word?" Ray piped up fast, cutting through the chatter. "Hold up, Vince, No way. He stepped closer, voice low but firm. You rode in here to fix Chen's mess, not to nab the troublemaker's mom. Jake's the one we nailed. Jess is the other half of this disaster. You take her, folks'll say you're just a horny old dog, not a boss cleaning house. Vince frowned, scratching his beard. She's just a woman, Ray. Killing her feels off. Ray's second-in-command, a gruff guy named Sid, jumped in. Give her to me, boss. I'm single, could use a wife. Ray shot him down. Nah. She's poison. Look at Chuck, Jake, Connor, Pops. All wrecked cause of her. Sid backed off, shrugging. Fine, but offing a looker like that? Still a damn shame. Vince mulled it over, then waved a hand. All right, here's the play. Old man Grady up the road just lost his wife. Give Jess to him. Keeps it clean. Ray kept his mouth shut, but his mind was spinning. Grady's ancient. Jess be free again soon enough. She sighed, no fight left, and shuffled off with Vince's men to Grady's shack. Vince finished the job, axed Jake, annexed Chin County into Shaw territory, and called it a day. Another notch on his belt. Vince Shaw's takeover stuck. Chin County was just a dot on Shaw territory's map now, another trophy for the old warlord. Word trickled out later. Connor's body turned up in a ditch, half-eaten by crows, and Pops got his head lopped off by some drifter with a grudge. That whole mess Jess stirred up, the Bamboo Grove scandal, ended with Chin County wiped out. Vince chalked it up as a win, another tale for his legend. And that's the end of that chapter, folks. Alright, that's the first story in the bag. Now Nancy's Tales is hitting you with round 2, don't tune out, 'cause this one's a keeper. I'm diving back into some old-school folklore for this. It's called The Carpenter Who Worked Nights, Got Stiffed, and Learned Grandma's Rule. You'll see why soon. Stick around. Back in the Jackson era, think early 1800s, rough and tumble days, there was this little town called Hudson Hollow, down in the river country. Lived a young guy named Tommy Hayes, honest as they come, maybe 15 or 16 when he started out. He apprenticed under a gruff carpenter named Lou Tanner, the best woodworker in the county. Tommy was quick on the uptake, never shied from hard work, and stood out among the other scrappy kids learning the trade. Lou took a shine to him, treated him like the son he never had, teaching him every trick in the book. Tommy didn't let Lou down, picked up carpentry like he was born with a hammer in hand, turning out work that'd make your jaw drop. Lou had a daughter, Lily Tanner, pretty as a sunrise, with a heart to match. Tommy fell hard for her, and she wasn't exactly blind to him either. They'd steal glances, swap shy smiles, classic young love brewing. Only problem? Lou's wife Maggie was a hard-ass about money. She didn't see Tommy as good enough. Poor kid from a dirt floor shack didn't cut it for her little girl. Maggie laid it out cold. Tommy, you wanna marry Lily? Cough up $100 cash, wedding gift, non-negotiable. No dough, no deal. $100 back then was a fortune, more than most folks saw in a year. Tommy didn't blink though, just nodded and got to work. He'd wake before dawn, grab his toolbox, and hit the streets of Hudson Hollow, hustling for any gig he could find. Main Street, Alley 10, Lane 23, he'd trudge those paths daily, hammering and sawing till his hands bled. 6 months of grinding, and Tommy's little stash box at home was starting to bulge. He counted it one night, $70, all in coins and crumpled bills. Not enough yet, but damn close. Then Lou cornered him after supper, looking twitchy.
Tommy, how's the cash coming?
70 so far, sir, Tommy said straight. 30 short, but I'm on it. Lou's face tightened. Trouble was brewing, and Tommy could smell it. Lou spilled it. Maggie's sister Clara had rolled into town with her spoiled brat, Marty Klein. Marty saw Lily and got stars in his eyes. Clara saw a match made in dollar signs. They're fixing to send a matchmaker next week, Lou muttered.
Magie sollt on Marty. Rich family, big house.
Lily hates it, locked herself in her room, won't eat a bite. Lou was stuck. Couldn't cross Maggie but couldn't watch Lily waste away either.
Tommy, this ain't walking slow.
She'll be hitched to Marty if you don't move fast. Lou dug into his pocket, pulled out a wad of bills, $30.
Take it, Keith. Go propose tomorrow.
Save her. Tommy stared at the cash, heart thumping, but shook his head after a long beat. Can't, sir, he said, voice firm. I told Maggie I'd earn every penny myself, spit and a nail, no shortcuts. If I take this, she'll call me a cheat, and I'll never hear the end of it. Lou sighed, half proud, half worried. Tommy was stubborn as a mule. Once he set his mind, good luck budging him.
Alricht, Kit, Lou Said, walking off. But you're racing the clock now. Once Lou shuffled off, Tommy's calm cracked.
He balled his fists, muttering to himself, no way in hell Lily's marrying that punk Marty. Clock was ticking, and he knew it, time to hustle harder than ever. Night had already fallen, but Tommy didn't care. He snatched his toolbox and hit the streets of Hudson Hollow, boots kicking up dirt under the moon. Fix your chairs, mend your doors, free if I flop, he hollered, voice echoing down the empty lanes. He trudged half the town, banging on doors, but folks were already bunked down, lights out, no takers. Every no stung, but Tommy kept moving, figuring he'd catch an early gig if he stayed out. Just as he turned for home, a creaky voice cut through the dark.
Hey, Kit, over here. Tommy spoon rund.
There, leaning on a cane, was an old woman, hunched gray, staring him down like she'd been waiting. Don't worry, ma'am, Tommy said, tipping his cap. I'll fix it right, no charge if I can't. She nodded, slow and stiff, then waved him to follow. Tommy trailed her, toolbox swinging, noticing her limp, one leg dragging, but steady as a plow horse. They wound through back streets to a dead-end alley, place he'd passed before. Deep in the shadows sat a run-down shack, door bolted all year round. She hobbled up and pointed. That's mine.
Inside, the hit like a Vertrag. Moldy, tick, choking.
She led him to a side room, pointing at a beat-up rocking chair under a square window. Moonlight spilled in, casting a long shadow across the floorboards. My man carved that for me way back, she rasped. Rains rotted it, and termites chewed the base. Can you fix it, boy?
Tommy swallowed hard. Middle of the night, a spooky old chair.
Felt off, but he'd come this far. Gimme an hour, ma'am, he said, voice steady.
It'll be good as new.
How much? She asked, eyeing him cautious-like. Let me finish first, Tommy grinned. If you're happy, we'll talk cash then. She cracked a thin smile, first sign of life in her, and nodded.
Fair enough.
Head on to bed, ma'am, he added. I'll holler when it's done. She gave him a long look, then limped off to the next room, cane tapping like a slow drum. Tommy fished a lantern from his box, but the damn thing wouldn't light, flickered and died every try. Screw it, he muttered, tossing it aside. Moon was bright enough through that window anyway. He got to work, sanding the rot, painting the frame, swapping out the termite-gnawed base with spare wood from his kit. Hammer clinked, saw buzzed, an hour flew by. He wiped sweat off his brow, stepped back, and nodded. Chair looked brand spanking new, damn proud work. Stepping outside to stretch, Tommy scoped the yard by moonlight.
Three shucks total. Window paper torn to shreds, broken bricks piled under the eaves.
One wall had caved in, beams scattered like bones. The old lady's room was the middle one, only spot still holding up. He knocked and poked his head in. Place was bare, a rickety bed, a wobbly table, nothing else. She was slumped on the mattress, but sat up slow when he walked in, eyes glinting. Chair's fixed, ma'am, Tommy said, offering a hand to help her up. She shuffled over, ran a bony finger along the rocker, and murmured, too good, can't even tell it was busted. Her face twisted, bitter for a flash, then softened. This gonna cost me big, huh? Tommy chuckled. Nah, ma'am, just a couple bucks. Don't sweat it. She shook her head, voice dropping. Truth is, kid, I ain't got that kind of money. The old woman sighed, leaning heavy on her cane.
No kids, no kin, husbands long gone.
Ain't got a dime coming in. Food scarce, clothes are rags. Tommy's jaw tightened, tongue-tied for a sec. He glanced at her, thin shawl bony frame, and felt a pang. Didn't expect her to be this broke. He thought of his own folks back home, same age, maybe scraping by 2. Been years since he'd seen him, and that hit hard. After a beat, Tommy cleared his throat. Ma'am, forget the pay. I'm good.
She blinked, sharp. No, can't let you walk for nothing, boy.
He waved her off, digging into his pocket for some loose change, few coins he'd scraped from earlier gigs. "Look, we crossed paths for a reason," he said, pressing the money into her hand. "Take this, buy a blanket, some grub. You need it more." He turned to go, but she grabbed his sleeve, quick as a snake. "Wait, don't leave yet." She hobbled to a corner, pulled out a burlap sack, and shoved it at him. "Got some soybeans here. Take 'em, I ain't taking your cash for free." Tommy hesitated, then slung the sack over his shoulder.
"Allrecht, Mom. Thanks."
As he hit the door, she called after him, voice low and odd.
"Listen good, Kid. Don't light no lamps when you get home."
He nodded, puzzled, but waved it off. "Rest up, ma'am," he said, stepping into the night. Tommy trudged back to his shack, toolbox clanking, sack bouncing on his back. He wasn't mad about the lost pay. Hell, he felt lighter, like he'd done right by somebody. Moon hung high, lighting his way through Hudson Hollow's quiet streets. By the time he stumbled into his yard, it was past midnight, dark as sin, dead silent. He fumbled through the door, groping for his lantern, habit kicking in. Then the old lady's words flashed. "Don't light no lamps." "What's that about?" he muttered, hand hovering. Before he could decide, footsteps crunched outside, heavy, deliberate. A gruff voice growled through the wall. "Saw somebody slip in, no light though."
"Tommy ain't back yet."
"Let's circle around, wait him out."
Tommy Frotze, hard hammering.
He crept to the window, peering through a crack.
Two big bastards loomed in the yard. Roughnecks, mean hell, knives glinting in the moonlight.
He held his breath, piecing it together. They'd been sniffing around earlier, must have cased his place while he was out hustling. No light saved his ass. Those goons figured he wasn't home, stalking off to set an ambush.
"Who the hell wants them?"
Tommy hissed under his breath. No time to guess. Staying put was a death wish. He eased out the back door, quiet as a ghost, and legged it for the sheriff's office down Main. Sheriff Hank knew Tommy, fixed his desk once, swapped stories over coffee. "Hank." Tommy panted, bursting in. "Got trouble, 2 thugs at my place, waiting to jump me." Hank didn't blink, grabbed his hat and whistled up 10 deputies.
"Let's roll, Kid."
Tommy led the posse back, bold now with backup. To prove his story, he lit the lantern this time, flame flickering as he stepped inside. Door crashed open right on cue. Those 2 bruisers charged in, swinging for him. Tommy ducked, yelling, "Now, Hank!" Deputies poured through the back, ropes flying, caught the bastards like hogs in a pen. Hank's deputies wrestled the 2 goons down, tying him tight while they squirmed and cursed. Once the dust settled, they cracked fast under Hank's glare. All right, don't hang us," one croaked. "Marty Klein sent us, rich kid from up the hill." Turns out Marty'd sniffed out Lily's soft spot for Tommy and didn't like it one bit. Jealous streak a mile wide, he'd hired these roughnecks to make Tommy disappear, quiet like, no traces. Hank hauled the thugs back to the jail, spitting mad, couldn't stand a coward like Marty pulling strings. Next morning, he dragged Marty himself into the courthouse, evidence stacked high, the goon's word, Tommy's story, the whole damn plot. Marty folded under the heat, couldn't wiggle out with cash or charm this time. Hank slapped him with hard time, sent him packing to a chain gang, far from Hudson Hollow. Justice hit swift, and the town buzzed with it. Word reached Lou and Maggie Tanner quick. Marty's scheme laid bare for all to see. Maggie went quiet, chewing on it. "Dodged a bullet there," she muttered to Lou. "Imagine Lily hitched to that snake. Would have been hell for her." Lou seized the chance, nodding at Tommy's grit. "Kid turned down my $30, Maggie. Earned his way, still got jumped for it. He's solid." Maggie's eyes softened. First time she saw Tommy clear. "All right, Lou. I misjudged him. He's got guts. Lily could do worse." Lou grinned. Maggie's blessing was gold. But she'd set that $100 rule, and they both wondered how long Tommy'd take to hit it. Right then, Tommy rolled up with a matchmaker in tow, cool as you please. He slapped $100 on the table, hard-earned cash, every cent legit. "Got more news," he said, chest puffed. "Bought a big place in town for me and Lily. Gonna bring my folks down, and you 2 are welcome to bunk with us." Lou and Maggie gaped. Kid had pulled a rabbit out of a hat. Lily bolted out, eyes shining when she heard Tommy'd come calling.
Big house?
How'd you swing that, Tommy? She asked, grabbing his arm, half thrilled, half worried he'd done something shady. Relax, Lil, he laughed, patting her hand. It's all above board. Came from them soybeans that old lady gave me. Her brow furrowed.
Soybeans?
What's that mean? Tommy's grin widened. He had a hell of a story to unpack. Check this, he said, hauling Lily inside. He grabbed that burlap sack from the night before, still sitting by his cot. Old lady handed me this. Thought it was soybeans. Felt heavy, though. He tipped it onto the table. Out spilled a pile of gold nuggets, clinking like a jackpot. Lily gasped. Tommy damn near jumped. She must have mixed it up, meant to keep this and give me beans instead. He'd figured on returning it, but fate had other plans. Tommy hitched up his horse next day, rode back to that shack to square things. Place was locked tight, white lantern swinging out front, a bad sign in these parts. Neighbor leaned over the fence. She's gone, kid, passed 2 days back. We buried her yesterday. Tommy's blood ran cold. 2 days? But I saw her last night. He trailed off, brain spinning. If she was dead then, who, or what, gave him that sack? Hats when it hit him, the old lady's weird tip, don't light no lamps. She'd known trouble was stalking him, Marty's goons, ready to pounce. Keeping his shack dark threw him off, saved his neck. Damn, he whispered, tipping his hat to the empty shack. Thanks, ma'am, wherever you are. She was gone, gold was his, couldn't give it back now. So he cashed some in, house for Lily, good deeds with the rest.